5,000 soldiers. That was the number. 5,000 United States Army troops, 1/4 of the entire standing army of the most powerful nation on the North American continent, deployed across the desert and mountain country of southern Arizona and northern Mexico. Mirror stations flashed signals from peak to peak across the Chiricahua Range. Cavalry watched every waterhole. Infantry sealed every mountain pass. 3,000 Mexican soldiers pressed from the south. Supply lines were cut. Food caches were destroyed. Water sources were poisoned and filled. All of it for this: 18 warriors, 13 women, 6 children, 2 of them infants. That was what Geronimo had left when he finally came in from the mountains. 37 people in torn clothing, their bodies worn to the bone by years of running, surrounded by 8,000 soldiers across 2 countries, and for 18 months not one of those 8,000 men had been able to touch them. This is the history the frontier actually produced. Not the legend, not the mythology, but the unvarnished record of what men did, what it cost them, and what it cost the people who stood in their way. His name was not Geronimo. He was born Goyakla in the Bedonkohe band of the Chiricahua Apache in the country that is now New Mexico in the year 1829. He grew up a warrior and a husband and a father. He had a wife named Alope. He had 3 children. He had a mother. By every account that survives of his early life, he was a man who had found in those people and that country everything a man requires. On March 5, 1851, while Goyakla and the Apache men were in the town of Llanos trading with the local merchants, Colonel Jose Maria Carrasco and 400 Mexican soldiers rode into the camp they had left behind. When Goyakla returned in the dark, he found what the soldiers had left: his mother, his wife Alope, his 3 children, all of them dead, all of them scalped where they lay. He said afterward, "I had lost all." He burned their possessions. He burned the decorations Alope had made for their home. He burned the playthings of his children. He stood in the ashes of his own life and made the decision that turned Goyakla into Geronimo, the name the Mexican soldiers screamed at their patron saint during the battle at Arispe, when this man, fighting the troops who had destroyed his family, refused to fall, refused to run, and drove through their lines with a ferocity that no bullet and no number seemed capable of stopping. They called out to Saint Jerome for protection. Jerome in Spanish is Geronimo. The name stuck. And for 35 years after the ashes of that camp had gone cold, the name was the most feared word on the frontier. By the summer of 1886, the Army had been chasing Geronimo's shrinking band for over a year and had nothing to show for it. General Crook had tried twice and failed twice, the second time watching Geronimo agree to surrender and then slip back into Mexico in the dark, because someone warned him that Crook's terms would not be honored. Crook resigned. General Nelson Miles took command on April 11, 1886, with orders to end the campaign by whatever means required. Miles sent 5,000 men. He built the mirror system. He cut every supply line he could find. None of it found Geronimo. On July 13, 1886, Miles gave a different order to a different kind of man. Lieutenant Charles Gatewood, 33 years old, suffering from rheumatism, known to the Apache by the name Bachin Dason, was ordered into the Sierra Madre of northern Mexico with 5 men, 2 Apache scouts, and no guarantee of return. Gatewood spoke the Apache language. He had spent years among the Chiricahua and was known to them as a man whose word held. Where 8,000 soldiers had failed, Miles was sending 1 lieutenant who was trusted. On August 25, 1886, Gatewood found Geronimo at a bend in the Bavispo River in the Taras Mountains of Mexico. He removed his weapons. He sat down. He passed out tobacco and paper. The men rolled cigarettes and smoked in silence before a word of consequence was spoken. What followed was not a negotiation between equals. Gatewood carried the truth of the situation plain in his words. The rest of the Chiricahua had already been taken. The reservation they had known was gone. There was nowhere left to go where the Army would not eventually find them. Geronimo listened. He said, "If you will give your word that we can meet General Miles with safety, we will go to him and accept his terms. We will throw ourselves on his mercy, something we have never done before." They broke camp on August 28th and moved north. Gatewood marched with them, slept in their camp, and when Lieutenant Abiel Smith tried to disarm the Apache on the trail with his own soldiers at his back, Gatewood stood between them and told Smith he would fight him before he let him near Geronimo's band. Smith backed down. One unarmed lieutenant held the line that 8,000 men had failed to find. They reached Skeleton Canyon on September 2nd, 1886. Miles arrived September 3rd. The formal surrender came on September 4th. 18 warriors, 13 women, 6 children, torn clothing, bodies that showed every mile of the years behind them. Geronimo stood in Skeleton Canyon and handed his Winchester rifle and his Sheffield Bowie knife to General Nelson Miles. He said, "This is the 4th time I've surrendered. I think it is the last." When it was done, he turned to Gatewood, the one man who had come to him without soldiers, without threats, without deception. He said, "Good. You told the truth. The promises Miles made in Skeleton Canyon did not survive the week. 2 years in Florida, then returned to Arizona. That was the agreement." President Grover Cleveland read the terms from New York and telegraphed his Secretary of War that he hoped nothing would be done with Geronimo that would prevent treating him as a prisoner of war, and then, almost as an afterthought, added that he would much prefer to hang him. Geronimo and his band were loaded into boxcars under armed guard and shipped to Fort Pickens, Florida, then to Fort Marion, then to Mount Vernon Barracks in Alabama, then to Fort Sill, Oklahoma in 1894, where he was given a small plot of land and forbidden from leaving without an armed military escort. He was displayed at the Pan American Exposition in 1901, displayed at the World's Fair in St. Louis in 1904. He rode in Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade in 1905. The Apache scouts who had helped track him down, the men whose knowledge of the mountains had done what the cavalry could not, were disarmed and shipped to Florida alongside the people they had helped to catch. After Skeleton Canyon, 261 Chiricahua Apache remained alive. Charles Gatewood, the man who actually ended the Apache Wars, was denied promotion, denied the Medal of Honor his commanding officers recommended. He died on May 20th, 1896, 10 years after the surrender he alone had made possible. Nelson Miles was promoted to commanding general of the United States Army in 1895. Geronimo died at Fort Sill, Oklahoma on February 17, 1909. Pneumonia. He was 79 years old. He had not seen his Arizona homeland in 23 years. He died as a prisoner of war in a place that was not his own, under a government that had broken every promise made to him in the canyon where he surrendered. His great-grandson said it plainly more than a century later. He died a prisoner of war. He is still a prisoner of war. His remains were never returned to his homeland. The man who threw himself on the mercy of the United States government received none.